wanted to thank people that traveled significant distances. The Millers from Boston and Fred from Boston, thank you very much for making that trip. Apparently there were 6 or 7 New York State troopers on his tail as he was speeding. We want to thank the Rochdalers who have come very much. Thank you very much. And of course all of the dearest relatives and dear friends of Irving and Angela. Now, it was the wishes of our parents that we hold such a gathering for family and dear friends, and that such an event not be one of mourning, but one of sharing stories, memories, and tributes to what I know you all agree were 2 remarkable people. Now, the loss of your parents is, of course, a deeply personal experience for my brother and myself, and all who knew and loved Angie and Irv. Much of our, in the case of the children, much of our moral framework in which we looked at the world, our responses to problems, our intellectual and cultural interests, even the tone you take in dealing with others, is to a significant extent carved by the outlook of your parents, far more than we initially realize and sometimes wish to admit. They were such a presence in our lives, of my brother and myself, even as we developed our own lives, and even if there was great distances between us, that both Phil and I admitted to each other the other day that we felt somewhat adrift without them this last month and a half. In fact, we would have asked Irving and Ange, did we do okay? Was the memorial all right for them? You know? Did the music come out all right? Irving would take my remarks and he would take a red pen and proofread them. As you know. At the same time, as it's a personal event, we are profoundly aware that Mom and Dad were part of an extraordinary generation. We are so pleased to have that generation represented at today's memorial. I want to also acknowledge that those that we have lost over the last several years, who meant a great deal to Angie and Irv. Mom's sister Josie and her husband, Uncle Bill. Dad's sisters Gracie and Aunt Lee and their husbands Al and Max. And Mom and Dad's Scrabble mate and good friend Charles Weinfeld, whose wife Renee is here today and who was Mom and Dad's best friend. Now, our parents' personalities were shaped not simply by their individual experiences, and there were many experiences, and I hope that we can recall some of those today. But they were, in fact, a generation, as you well know, that was shaped by social experiences, experiences that millions of people passed through. The Great Depression, World War, the post-war period. They gave rise to children who grew up in that period and thought it was particularly strange that their parents would reuse tea bags or reuse things, you know, or be careful with toilet paper, or, you know. We all thought, after all, you know, this was America, land of plenty. And now I laugh because I certainly use a tea bag 2 or 3 times every time I have a visit. They were born, in the case of my father, some 15 years before the October crash on Wall Street, and my mother, 5 years before it. They lived through a period of great social upheavals, and they reared children, as I said. And we, in our generation, the generation of my brother and I, the generation of my cousins, we're sort of the bridge between 2 centuries. The 20th century and these experiences of the early 20th century, and now we're rearing children and young adults who have their feet firmly planted in the 21st century. Now, I raise these issues not as some type of sentimental journey into nostalgia, but only to emphasize that while each generation must make its own experiences and take on the world in its own way, that generation can only be enriched by the knowledge of the past. Otherwise, tragically, each generation is doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. I remember my mother once saying, because it's very popular to say, well, this invention was created by this individual genius and great men and so on. And she would insist that, in fact, there was a progression of mankind. She would insist that every great invention, every great scientific breakthrough or artistic breakthrough was a result of someone standing on the shoulders of those that lived before them and who had made great conquests themselves. Now, I apologize if I've digressed, but when you think of the personalities of my parents, even in their last days, and I hope to let you know that about their life in Michigan after they left their beloved home of New York City. And we'll do that after we eat. But you can't think of my parents unless you were, you can't think of their last days unless you were, and you would always be impressed by their humanity, by their idealism, and despite the missteps, a deep faith in the possibility of humanity and in human progress. And that they imparted to my brother and myself, and indeed to anyone that they knew. At the same time, this confidence that they had in humanity gave them a chance to give Phil and I a certain amount of leeway, a little bit of room to make our own mistakes, to go off in our wrong direction. But they had a confidence that somehow that path could be found, and that they shared their ideals with their sons. Of course, I would be remiss to say that Angie and Irving's relationship, you have a Sicilian Italian, you had a Jewish man. It was, if I were to say that it was blissful every moment of the day, I'd be lying through my teeth. They were a volatile bunch, but they lived together. They were married for 58 years. In fact, Angie died on October the 2nd, just 2 days short of their 58th anniversary, and Irving died 3 weeks and 1 day later, on October 24th. So despite the volatility, or maybe because of the volatility, they loved each other deeply, they depended on one another, and the broad milieu, the broad periphery of friends, co-thinkers, co-artists, and relatives that they loved deeply. So on that, we'd like to urge you to enjoy your lunch. We'd like to really encourage everyone to come up afterwards, just relate your own stories of Irv and Angie, and understand that everyone here is, part of their lives. No one here is taking notes and criticizing or anything like that. We want to hear from you. He is. Oh, sorry, actually Irving is. So please enjoy your lunch, and afterwards we'll have more tributes. I do want to say something that my mother, in her artwork, as you see how beautiful it is, she was a very poor entrepreneur. She didn't know how to sell her artwork. And so in that spirit, we wanted to make sure that everyone who doesn't yet have any of her artwork to please take something home with you today. Okay, so please enjoy your lunch. Sure. Bill's got a special video. Oh, by the way, we wanted to thank Koenig's. There's all sorts of sort of notable points in our lives. Tracy, my wife, Tracy and I had our wedding reception here in 1994. And some of you were there. And then in 1999, we held a celebration of Irving's 85th birthday and Angie's birthday, which was also here. Now, Irving was in on the surprise party, but Angie wasn't. And we have a